יעשה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל, ואמרו
Hi everybody, I'm Rabbi Joshua Hammerman, coming to you from Temple Beth in Stamford. And the question is, what is a synagogue in terms of being a house of worship? Synagogue is a Greek term, and in Hebrew, the term for it is Beit Knesset, which means a house of gathering. So really, a synagogue is not primarily considered to be a house just for prayer, but a house for general gathering. In fact, another term for it is Beit Midrash, which means a house of study. In ancient times, of course, there was the temple and the sanctuary in the wilderness we have in the Bible, the temple in Jerusalem, where sacrifices were brought. But once the Romans destroyed the second temple, the sacrificial system ended. And so Jews needed a place where they could gather and do something else. And that something else turned out to be prayer, but not just prayer, also gathering as a community to discuss common issues and concerns and to learn together, to study Torah together. Studying Torah is the prime religious act for a Jew, even beyond prayer. And synagogues also were portable in that they could be built anywhere. You didn't have to be in Jerusalem. Synagogues aren't necessarily holier than other places, although there is a sense of God's presence here, as you can see from this eternal light that is found above our ark in our sanctuary. And the Torahs are here. Most homes won't have a Torah for themselves, but so people will come here to read from the Torah, but you can study the Bible anywhere. And although God's presence is symbolized by that eternal light, in a sense, that eternal light just symbolizes God's presence everywhere. So a synagogue is not holy ground compared to even the home. The home can be as holy as a synagogue. And yet, of course, for Jews, it is a very special place. And synagogues are found all over the world. They are places where Jews can gather. Let me tell you a little about the history of this Jewish community and this synagogue. It wasn't until the late 19th century that large numbers of Jews began to move to Stamford, primarily from New York City. The first place of worship was Agudath Shalom Synagogue, the Orthodox Shul, as it's called, in 1889. And then in about 1920, a group sort of broke off from Agudath Shalom that wanted a more liberal, more modern liturgy, using more English, following in what was then becoming the Reform and Conservative rites, the more liberal rites of Judaism, and that became known as Temple Beth. It started downtown. A small group of people met in Summer Street at the home of William Block to organize this new congregation. There were immediately 50 interested families, and they found a place in Grey Rock Place at the building of the Hebrew Institute, and they were served for a time by visiting rabbis, including Rabbi Max Artz, who later became one of the greatest names in conservative Judaism. And it took the name Temple Beth El, Beit El in Hebrew, from the Bible, the book of Genesis, where Jacob had his famous dream, and it means house of God. In 1922, a building committee was formed. 1924, land was purchased, and a building on Prospect Street downtown, around near Stamford High School and Dunkin' Donuts. You might know the area. That's where the original Bethel was built. Synagogue was there for about 40 years. Rabbi David Perlman was the prime leader while they were down there. And then at the end of the 1960s and then into the 70s, plans were made for building this building, which is on Roxbury Road near the Merritt Parkway in northern Stamford. Rabbi Alex Goldman, my predecessor, was the rabbi who led in that effort. We have, as you can see, beautiful grounds and beautiful sanctuary that opened to the public in 1973. The first services were held here during the Yom Kippur War, the 1973 war, and at that time there were no permanent pews here, so it was sort of a fascinating opportunity for people to be pioneers in sort of a makeshift sanctuary at that time. But this synagogue has endured for quite some time here on this property, and our cemetery happens to be right next door, which is a very convenient thing and also a beautiful thing that we can have processions from our sanctuary right to our cemetery for funerals. This year, 2020 rather, is 100 years since the beginning of Temple Bethel in 1920, and so we are celebrating a major anniversary. Welcome to Temple Bethel, and now you're part of our history. Hi, it's Rabbi Joshua Hammerman again, and I want to show you around our sanctuary. This is called the bima. The bima is the pulpit, which is elevated, although not that high up compared to many congregations with older architecture. It's a little more of a democratic look in that we're a bit in the round and that people are not that much lower than the clergy. You see, as I mentioned in a prior video, the eternal light, which is hanging majestically from the sanctuary ceiling. It's a core symbol. Then you have our ark, which is a unique one in that is walk-in. It's really more of a Torah room, and it's inspired by Torah rooms, arks, in a synagogue in Nice, France, and also a synagogue in Singapore, was designed by a Dutch artist and architect. So within the ark, you see the Torahs themselves, and on top of the ark, or right above the Torahs, are stained glass windows of the 12 tribes of Israel, the sons of Jacob in the Bible. And they're found with symbols that are mentioned in the Bible about each tribe. For instance, Benjamin is compared to a wolf. Judah, the tribe of Judah, is like a lion. These are mentioned in the blessings of Moses and Jacob to the tribes in Deuteronomy and in Genesis. We have Torahs. There are about a dozen Torahs that in our possession, as well as a Holocaust Torah that is not usable, but was rescued from Czechoslovakia during the time of the Holocaust and brought to synagogues. Many Torahs were brought to synagogues, and we were fortunate to get one of them from the Holocaust. Now, there are stained glass also on the sides. You can see on the left and the right. It's hard to see from here, but they're Hebrew letters representing the 10 Commandments. So I'll show you some of the windows here. You can see the Hebrew letters, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, etc. And I'm just going to show you a close-up view of the Torahs inside our ark, which has a see-through curtain. But here you get a much closer-up view of the Torah scrolls. And I know that we were hoping to have everyone here in person to have this visit. Let's pray that before long we will all be able to meet on our bima, on our pulpit, and get a much closer look at the Torah scrolls. What I am wearing, just in terms of religious symbolism, once again, this is called a talit, a prayer shawl, and it is worn while at prayer for the most part as a religious garment. And within the progressive Jewish movements, it is worn by men and women. In an Orthodox setting, it would only be worn by men. Welcome to our chapel. This is our small sanctuary, and it is based on the furnishings that used to be at the old Bethel on Prospect Street before everything moved up here in 1973. So they took the main sanctuary and turned it into essentially a chapel here. So you can see the ark. Again, with the eternal light above it. You see the stained glass windows along the sides. You see the memorial plaques, memorial tablets to recall those who were members of the congregation who've passed away. And just focus on the ark for a second. You see the table where the leader of the service will stand. We have our weekday services here in the morning. Right above the ark, you see the Ten Commandments, and then also the verse, Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid, from Psalm 16, which says, I place God before myself always. And the curtain also says it is a tree of life for those who hold fast to it. And you can see the Torah scrolls are found inside the ark. This is a Torah scroll, and we read from it on Shabbat, on Saturdays, and also Mondays and Thursday mornings. It's traditionally read. Those were the market days of ancient times. I'll also show you this shofar, this ram's horn, which is a beautiful one. It might be actually from an antelope or a very big ram. But we use that around the high holidays of the Jewish New Year and Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, in September. This smallish chapel, it seats about 100 or less, probably about 75 actually, and we use it quite often for small events. Welcome to the chapel.
I'm Meryl Silverstein. I'm living now in Stamford, and I have been for about the last 13 years. And when I moved to Stamford, my husband and I joined Temple Bethel, and we also joined another congregation, Temple Sinai. So we have our interests in different Jewish communities. And I grew up in Brooklyn in a neighborhood which was very much Jewish, and you didn't have to think too much about being Jewish because so many people around us were Jewish.
Hi, my name is Jamie Moravitz. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, and I've been part of Temple Bethel for the last 7 or 8 years. I love it there. Well, I grew up Reform, and my family wasn't very religious at all, but they wanted us to, my sisters and I, to have Jewish, like a sense of our Jewish culture. And so we went to Hebrew school, and we had mitzvahs, and I went to confirmation class, which is kind of just like continuing ed, essentially, for a few years. I really enjoyed that. And at Temple, we really didn't go to services very much. I remember only going to the family services, which is kind of funny because then going to services when I was older, everything seemed very strange if it was not kid oriented, because that was like, well, isn't that what services are supposed to be like? And it was kind of why I felt pretty at home at Temple Bethel, even though it's conservative temple, because they have a lot of family programming and there's a lot of singing and instruments in some of the services. So it kind of seemed similar in certain ways. And actually, funniest story is that when my husband and I were dating and he wanted me to like the temple, he decided that my first impression of the temple should be bringing me there for like the Purim service or something, the kids' Purim service, so that I could see all the kids and all the fun things they do with kids. And so that kind of made me feel at home.
My name is Rosalea Fisher. I'm originally from Pennsylvania and have lived in Washington, D.C. area and Pittsburgh and New Jersey and in Connecticut now for 50 years. All right, I was president in 1990, from 1993 to 1995. And since then, we've had 3 women presidents, one coming on in July 1, 2020. So it's a new tradition, but a continuing tradition.
I feel that I have not had a very good formal Jewish education, but over the course of my life, I have been exposed to so many fine teachers who have introduced me to philosophy and thinkers that have really enriched my Jewish life. Rabbi Mordecai Kaplan, perhaps the greatest Jewish thinker of the 20th century, defined Judaism as a religion of the Jewish people. Similarly, the medieval Jewish philosopher Saadia Gaon said that were the Torah, the Bible, to be abrogated, there would be no Jewish people. Religion and community go hand in hand. The Torah, the Bible, is the underpinning of Jewish culture and civilization. It tells us everything from how to live on a daily basis to how to treat each other, the beings with which we share the planet, and the planet itself. The Torah has given us our own calendar so that we can live in Jewish time, observing our Sabbaths and festivals together.
Community means a lot to us. We participate in Sabbath services, sit on committees and the Board of Trustees to support the work of the temple. We believe in Tikkun Olam, Hebrew for the repair of the world. We accomplish this by our social action and our pursuit of social justice. For example, we have a Reut committee. Reut means friendship, and that helps the congregants connect with people who request assistance. For example, I read to and with a blind woman who I met through Reut.
My Jewish community extends across time and space. My traditions connect me to my ancestors, and they are my legacy to my children and grandchildren. I am connected to Jews worldwide. This I especially appreciated this year when family and friends could not gather to celebrate Passover. You really can't have a Seder for one person or 2 people. The Torah itself tells us this. If your Passover offering is too much for your family, you're expected to invite your neighbors to share it. Many of us Zoomed our Seders to create a sense of community in observing the holiday.
I think one of the benefits is that it's really important in general, but especially in today's political and crazy climate to learn about other cultures and their history, and even just to talk to people from other cultures so that we realize that we're all very similar. I think it's also really important for synagogues and other places of worship to have interfaith events, because then they are able to stay relevant and viable, and not so and more inclusive. Yeah, so that more people are able to feel involved. I think the more people that talk together, the more people can learn about each other. And
Interfaith work has become an integral part of our outreach work. TBE is part of the Interfaith Council of Stamford and participates in many of its interfaith community activities. Rabbi Hammerman was the chair of the council in the 1990s. Even when I sing in this interfaith choir, it brings me the singing brings me joy, but the whole event and the purpose of the event is also very meaningful for me. I think the event that we had on racism, where we had all the officials and this interfaith chorus sang, and the clergy were there. It was everybody fighting, trying to fight the idea of racism. It was very powerful. It was planned in 2 minutes, and it happened very quickly, and we did it. Absolutely did it.
I want to tell you a little bit about my Jewish journey. I was born in a small town in southern Ontario, and in our town of about 35 Jewish families, I was the only Jewish person, along with my two brothers, in our school. And we had a very active small Jewish community, and we met at a little building. Went to Hebrew school 3 times a week, and went to Friday night services. And Friday night in our home was quite beautiful. My mother always put out a white tablecloth, always said the prayers over the candles. We said the prayers over the wine, and to this day, that is how I celebrate Shabbat. I did stop using a white tablecloth for many years, and when my mother passed away 3 years ago, that was going to be my tribute to her, was to always put a white tablecloth on for Friday night Sabbath dinner. When I was a teenager, I moved to New York because my father had passed away, and we came to be with my mother's family. And we belonged to a very Orthodox synagogue. And I proceeded to attend services on a weekly basis. A synagogue has always been an important part of my life. And up until the present at Temple Beth, which I have been a member of for 43 and a half years. My children have also maintained a lot of the traditions that I have, and that makes me feel pretty wonderful to think that they valued it enough to teach it to their children, whether it's sending them to Hebrew school or day schools, having challah on Shabbat, and keeping kosher and not eating forbidden foods, never eating meat out unless it's in a kosher restaurant. And that's something I had given up for a while, but I returned about 30 years back to doing that. So I am very aware of my Judaism on a regular basis, on a moment-to-moment basis. I believe that whatever I do it with a Jewish feeling. And whether it's taking care of my neighbors or volunteering for an organization, Judaism, I hope will live on for many more generations in my family and in everybody's family. I think that it's important to pass this on. It's been a religion that has moved with the times and changed with the times, and but is still steadfast and enlightening.
Hi, I'm Jerry Ginsberg from Temple Beth in Stamford. My spiritual journey is different than most. I have been a member here for over 30 years and made the transition from congregant to clergy when I was ordained as a rabbi in 2019. And I did not go to my rabbinical school looking to become a rabbi. I just wanted to learn more. For many years in Stamford, my family was typical. We joined the temple when we moved from New York City to Stamford with 2 children. Our kids went through religious school at Temple Beth and became bar and bat mitzvah here, continuing religious training through high school. But just before my daughter became a bat mitzvah, my father died. In Judaism, it is traditional to say a special mourner's prayer each day for a month. So I started the recitation of Kaddish for the month, and then continued with the morning service for a while longer, until I became a regular at the 7:30 morning half-hour services. I eventually started leading some of those services, and became more and more intrigued about our religion and culture. I learned about the daily services and those held at the end of our week, our Shabbat. Through Shabbat services, I learned more about the Jewish Bible. But there are many more things to learn about Judaism. After talking with several people, I decided to gain a more formal education, seeking enrollment at the Academy for Jewish Religion. I found that studying gave me the opportunity to immerse myself into texts and also discuss them with my fellow students and instructors. And after 7 long years of study, I was ordained as a rabbi. Now I am bringing that training to my home synagogue, where I am privileged to continue praying and teaching with our wonderful members and community. I might have come to the rabbinate a bit later than some, but I find the work very rewarding. It gives me an opportunity to explore almost all phases of congregational life and gain better insight into our members and their families. Be shalom, in peace.
To me, being Jewish is being able to go to any community in the world and being able to recite the same prayers. Everybody is saying the same prayers. Maybe they chant it with a different melody, but the words are always the same, and that's the universal joy of being a member of the Jewish faith. Jewish traditions, and it has kept me grounded. It keeps me on a straight path. It gives me warmth and joy every day of my life.
Being Jewish for me is full of learning and joy and community and music, and just it's all part of my heritage. I've been a student of Judaism since I was a child, and it just continues on and on and on, never ending.
Important things I think to know about our religion, I think would start with the idea of tzedakah, which is the idea of giving to those less fortunate. And so that could be the form of giving food, or giving to certain charities and just helping people. And that kind of idea of social justice kind of ties in with tzedakah a little bit. The other thing I think that kind of comes to mind is the idea of questions and how important asking questions are. And just that even things in the Torah or things in different stories or anything about Judaism that you question is not seen as a bad thing, but something to be encouraged. That even doubting God is seen as okay because at least you're thinking about God. And so it's very open as a religion. And I think that makes it more inclusive and easier to get on board with, I guess.
Rabbi Jonathan Sachs expresses the relationship between religion and community thus: faith is the redemption of solitude. It is about relationships between us and God, us and our families, us and our neighbors, us and our people, us and humankind. Judaism is not about the lone soul. It is about the bonds that bind us to one another and to the author of all. It is, in the highest sense, about friendship.
I hope you enjoyed your visit to Temple Beth as we celebrate our 100th anniversary. Of course, you're always welcome to join us for services or any other event, whether in person or, as it is these days, virtually. It would be my pleasure to greet you and to see you again. Thank you.
Thanks for visiting with us. We hope you'll come again soon. Shalom, lehitraot.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, Adonai our God, Adonai is one. Shema, a recreation, loving life and its mysterious source with all our heart and all our spirit, all our senses and strength. We take upon ourselves these promises to care for the earth and those who live upon it, to pursue justice and peace, to love kindness and compassion. We will teach this to our children throughout the passage of the day, as we dwell in our homes, as we go on our journeys. From this time we rise until we fall asleep, and may our actions be faithful to our words, that our children's children may live to know truth and kindness have embraced, peace and justice have kissed and are one.
May the one who makes peace on high, make peace for us and for all of Israel and for all who dwell on earth. And let us say, Amen. Oh, say shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru Oh, say shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru Oh, say shalom bimromav.